Hello everyone. I'm Hitendra Kataria, working in Cloudflare as application manager, and with me I have.
Hello everyone, my name's Julio and I'm the Salesforce developer for the sales ops team.
We both work at Cloudflare building the sales applications and automate our sales processes. Cloudflare is internet security and performance company. Essentially, we bring internet closer to our customer. Today we're going to speak on level of your processes with Google API integrations and Salesforce. Let me ask you these questions. Have you heard about complex business processes? I'm sure that's why I see them knocking heads there. That's why you guys are here. I was just looking at a dictionary meaning of complex. Complex is adjective. It's composed of many interconnected parts. It's so complicated or hard to understand or deal with. Today I'm going to go with one of the complex processes we had, how we deal with, and how we solve that. And you'll see in a demo. So the next, here in the picture, you will see our sales rep, Calby, dressed up nicely. You can see his salesperson, and he's looking at our complex pricing calculations to solve to give the right price to the customer. Like in Cloudflare, as a result, in number of products we sell, pricing is not straightforward. It's very complex. It's like, just to give you an example, to the price the content delivery network product, they have to enter the number of domains, how many domains are there. Also, they have to enter number of total bandwidth customer want to use it, how much the traffic geo-distributions, bandwidth percentage, 12% in North America versus 50% in North Korea, and price varies, based on the geo usage of the bandwidth, and what is the number of HTTP requests from the origin. There are 30 plus parameters which encounter to price the particular product, and that is too much for any sales reps to have it. That is like solving the calculus for them. So for that, we had the pricing calculator in a Google Spreadsheet, and you shared with all the reps. So now, if you see how the reps want to price the product, they have to open the two different applications. One is like Salesforce and Google Sheet in two different tabs, and this is how they select the product, they enter all the consumptions like bandwidth and data usage and everything. Once they enter, they get the final price from the spreadsheet back. Once they get that final price back, they go to the opportunity record and enter that final monthly price. Now, what we are losing, we just get the final price, but we don't get the all the consumptions value in Salesforce, because that is too manual process for the reps to follow it. And if required, they can submit the pricing approval. So if you have this kind of processes in your org, what would be the reps experience would be? You can see from the picture itself, very frustrated experience with the processes and the systems. Reps are spending more time to price a product than selling a product. So with the next tab, if you see that, with this result, we were capturing incorrect data metrics, which is not useful for our sales strategy. We didn't have customer usages, how much price. Reps are entering, but how much they are entering, that is also you have to rely on the human errors. And this is not a scalable approach at all. As we moved from startup to successful company, we couldn't sustain the same model. We had shared Google Spreadsheet with everyone, and sometimes I've seen there are multiple reps are on the shared spreadsheet, and then they overwrite each other's input, and that's also not scalable. So they end up having the copy of their own Google Spreadsheet. So what we did, other issue I want to see is pointed out over here is huge data security issue. Anyone can download the spreadsheet and take it with them. So with the lack of scalability issue, we thought of why don't we integrate the user experience through connected app. Why don't we give the reps an access to pricing within the Salesforce? And then we started looking the different CPU solutions in the market, like Steelbrick and Aptos and those. And soon we realized that the CPU engines, CPU solutions have something called a price rule set engine. And those engines are not robust enough to accommodate the complex pricing which we have it. So, and also you have to pay as you grow. So we thought up to integrate Salesforce with Google Spreadsheet, which is our pricing calculator resides in that, and that's how this project born. So for the next step, I would like to ask Julio to take us to the next step and show us the demo.
All right, thank you very much, Hitendra. So as my colleague mentioned, we needed these two systems with the Salesforce Cloud as well as Google services to work together so they act as if they're both one system. The last thing we want is for a representative like Kelby to go into the system, to go into into Google services, into the Google Sheet, enter in the data, have to enter the same data into Salesforce, and just duplicate their work. We don't want that. We don't want that process where they're kind of, it's mundane. So the last thing we want is we want the process to be frustrating for the representatives so that they're not, at one point, not even using this process. So with that, we figured that we'd have to build this out in a way so that this system doesn't require any kind of user interaction on their end, so that in a way we can send the data from a Lightning component page, and then when they select the product and enter in the amount, we send the quantity into the Google Sheet for this example, and then when the quantity is sent in for the product, we can then get the amount on the Google Sheet, and that's going to be sent at the same time instantaneously back into the Lightning component page, all without the user having to interact on the Google Sheet in the first place. And the way that we're going to do this is writing some Apex code. So before we even get to that next step, though, we first did some research to figure out, okay, is there maybe any libraries out there that we can potentially use? Because why reinvent the wheel? If there's something out there, we can just use that and save a lot of work. So we did some Google searching, just typed in something like Google API Salesforce just to see what can come up. And the first thing that we get is an official Salesforce page. So I'm like, OK, seems promising. We can potentially use maybe the code that's on here. But the first thing that stood out right away for me was, this page was updated in July 2009. So I'm not really hopeful that I'm going to find anything here. So, but hey, who knows? Maybe I might find something, right? So I did some digging on this page just to see what I can find. And there was a link. So we had a Google repo. So I'm thinking, OK, yeah, there's a potential. We can use this one. We can probably use maybe snippets of this code to build out our library. Or if it's just like an endpoint that's just a version 1, it's updated version 4, let's use that. Perfect. And unfortunately, that link doesn't really take me anywhere as well. So it took me to a 404. So with some further Google searching, research, it didn't really entail anything. So with that, we'd have to invent the wheel. So for Apex. So now that we know what we have to do, as I stated earlier, our process requires so that it doesn't require the user to really interact with the Google Sheet, and as well as having to have them to authenticate into the Google Sheet. We want it in a way so that we kind of have like a proxy user act on their behalf, so that this proxy user is interacting with the Google Sheet, sending the data into there, and then getting the result from our input to send back to the user without them doing anything on this page. They just enter in the amount and they're done. So this process that we're going to use for our implementation is a two-legged OAuth approach, and we're going to use a service account. And what's a two-legged OAuth? Two-legged OAuth is, you can think of, there's two-legged OAuth and there's three-legged OAuth. So what a three-legged OAuth does is you try to log into a service. Maybe say you want to create an account on Airbnb. You want to register, and it'll ask you, would you like to sign in using your Facebook account? So you would say, yes, let me log in through Facebook, and I'll use my credentials to say it's OK that you have access to log into Airbnb, and then you're good to go. You can then log into Airbnb. So we're not going to use that approach. What we're going to have is we're going to have the service account authenticate on its own behalf so that the user doesn't have to require them logging into Google services to say, yes, it's OK, I want to access, and then I want to be able to send the data through the Google Sheet, because we are not going to use that approach at the same time, because as we stated earlier, we don't want to share this Google Sheet with the users. We want it so that it's a server-to-server interaction between Salesforce and Google Sheets. And you can think of a service account, which is it's a Google service account. you can think of it like as a generic Google account that we all have. So mine's, for example, like julio@cloudflare.com. That's my Google account. We'll have this generic proxy account that strictly does the API calls and has access to this pricing calculator sheet. So if we go through the flow, we're going to create and assign a JOT. So a JOT consists of 3 different components, our claim, our signature, and I forget what the other one is, but it's essentially just the credentials to say, hey, this is my private key, this is my email as part of the account for the service account. Can I get access to a token? So when we create that, the creating process is going to be done in Apex code. And when I create that, we're going to go ahead and use that JOT to just send it to the Google service to say, hey, is this legitimate? Can I get a token? Can I use my private key to get access? And then Google servers will then validate this to make sure if it's OK. And if it is, it'll then send us back a token that we can use to finally make our API calls, which we'll then call back. And then for our demo, we'll just call the update REST call for the Google Sheet services. And then more information about 2-legged OAuth and 3-legged OAuth and service accounts can be found on the link below. And I won't go into too much detail about service accounts, but just know that as part of this demo, that's what we'll be using here. All right, so the moment everyone's been waiting for. So we're going to go through step by step, and we're going to show you how we did this. So we'll first go over the service account. I'll just go over briefly of how to create one, how to create the private key. And then with that information, we'll go ahead and save that into a custom metadata type. Our custom metadata type is called a Google service account. And then we'll just save the information there. We'll save the email of the service account, the private key, as well as what kind of permissions we can grant the service account, because at the same time, we don't want to give the service account like God mode, only just access to limited things. Next, we'll cover the code. The code will consist of 2 classes. We'll have our class called Google Force. Google Force will be the authentication part of the class for the 2-legged OAuth. And then we'll have the Google Sheets, and Google Sheets will be the class that will make the REST calls for our update. And then you'll see all this in action on our Lightning page once we all put this together. All right. So using that same link that I mentioned earlier about the information about 2-legged OAuth and service accounts, this is the same page that you'll be taken to when you go to that link. And if I scroll down through this page and select, let's see. If I scroll down through this page and find, where's it at? There we go, under the section called Service Accounts. Oh, I pulled up the wrong page. Funny. All right, let me just grab this link. All right, there we go. So this is the page that you'll be taken to on the PowerPoint slide. So the server-to-server interaction between, in our case, the Salesforce instance as well as the Google services. And if I scroll down to creating a service account, there will be a link called Open Service Account Page, and if I select that, I'll be taken to my Google API dashboard. And for this demo, I've already have a project created, so I'll select Dreamforce. And under this section, I will go ahead and create service account. I'll just type in demo 2. We can leave this part blank. It's not really applicable for our demo. And then I'll select furnish a new private key. And then this one's going to be a JSON. So once I create that, I can then download JSON, and I'll contain the private key for our service account. So we're going to take the contents of this private key. So if I highlight this all the way up to right over here. I'm going to take that and save that into our custom metadata type. And then I'll save the client email of the service account, which is this section right here. And that's all we need to do for the service account. So the next step is we'll then go into our Salesforce instance. And now I'm going to select metadata types under setup. And then if I select the custom metadata type called Google Service Accounts, I'll go ahead and select Manage Records. And you can see that we have our record called Dreamforce, so I'll select that. And you can see that we have our information for our demo, the email, as well as the private key set up. And then the scope, so the scope is the kind of permissions that you would grant access to the service account. So for our demo, I'm going to grant it this endpoint right here, so googleapis.com/auth/spreadsheet. So what that does is it'll give me access to say I have access to update the spreadsheet as long as it's shared with me. So if I go to this page, this REST API call for spreadsheets.values.update, which is what we'll be using here, the required scope, if I scroll down this page, for authorization is, as long as I use one of these scopes, then I should be good to go. And of course, you have to share the Google Sheet. So this is the Google Sheet that we'll be using for our example. And if I share this with the service account, which I already have, then it's good to go. Then I can start making my API calls through Apex. All right. And then before I jump into the code, we also have another, not a custom metadata type, but a custom setting. And that is called Google SA token. So what that does is Google SA token, through the Apex code, we can cache the token that we receive after making the JOT request so that we don't have to constantly make the call to get a new token every single time. So that'll save on our API calls as well too, so that for the duration of 1 hour, we'll have this token that's alive, and we can use this same token to make the API calls. And all that's done, all of that is done through an Apex, through the Apex code, through Google Force, and I'll show you that in a bit. All right, so now if I jump into the code, we have our first class right here, Google Force, and then Google Force, what that does is when we instantiate our class, what it's going to do is it's first going to look for the service account to make sure that it exists. And otherwise, if it doesn't, then it'll let us know that a service account was not found. Otherwise, if we do have one, it'll then check to see if there's a current token that exists. And if it does exist, so right over here, let me just highlight that. That's the constructor for our class. If there's a token that exists, then I'll go ahead and set that up right here. Otherwise, if it doesn't, it'll just go ahead and set that up to instantiate just a regular object for the SA token, so then we can use that information to create our token. All right. So then the next section, you see that we have our header, which is going to be a JOT, and then it's going to use the hashing algorithm to go through the authentication process. Next, we have our claim, which consists of our scope that we have set up in the custom metadata type. Right under here, we're going to go ahead and call our OAuth token endpoint to make the request and get a token. And then we're going to make sure that it expires in 60 minutes right over here on this line. And the next, the signature, which is the private key of the JOT. And then for every API call that we make, whether it's Google Sheets or any other class that we have set up, it's always going to use this one method called sendRequest. And then under sendRequest, it's always going to check to see to get the access token. And then under the get access token, which is under this line right here, we'll then check to see if the token has expired. And if it has expired, then we'll go to make the request to get a new token. Otherwise, we'll just grab whatever's been saved under the custom setting. All right. And then the next piece is our Google Sheet. So for our example, we have, let's see. So it's set up in a similar fashion to the Java library that's set up for the API call, the Google API library for Java. So it's similar. It's not the same, but it's close enough. And you can make the same kind of similar calls using the approach that we have set up called under our Spreadsheets inner class values, and we drill all the way through that part to get to our update range. So for our demo, we're going to be using update range. And then under the update range, we're going to set up our different parameters to make our call. So under update range, we're going to reference our spreadsheet ID. We're going to reference the range to which ones we want to update. So for our demo, if I go back to the page, in our instance, we're going to make a call, for example, to pass in a value through here, like say 5. And then we also want to get a result under this column. So from B2 to C2 is what we'll be doing for our range. And then we can pass in the different parameters that we have for our updates. Let me go through and show this to you. Let's see, where's the update? All right, so yeah, so it's set up in the same manner. So let me pull that up. All right. So just the same way I call the update range, you can call in and set up your different parameters, such as the set value input option, or set includes value response. So just like right here, we have that. And then I can set the includes values in response. So just as I mentioned, we want ranges B2 and C2. So if I include this parameter, which means include values in response, if for my demo I'm only passing a value for B2, but I also want to get the result from C2 all in one API call so that I'm not calling an API to update and then get. I can just do that in one request. So using this parameter, I'm going to use this for the demo to get my input, output all in one call. And then I can also set up the value input options. So that'll just be the one value that I'm going to send in to pass in whatever value I want. So, all right. And now if I pull up the page for the demo, so this is the page that we'll be using right here. And then the code for this is just straightforward. It's just simple, some HTML with just some select boxes and an input box and some JavaScript code to show and hide the input boxes. But the more important part that we want to see, of course, is the actual calls. So right over here, the minute I pass in a value, say like 5 or whatever, 10, then it's going to call this, this method right here, which is Aura enabled. So then it's similar to like JavaScript promoting. And then when you pass in the amount, the quantity of the product, we're going to instantiate the Google Force class. And it's right there, that's where it's going to look for the service account. The next step, we're then going to instantiate the Google Sheets class, which then passes in the information about the service account. We're then going to specify which ranges we want. So for our instance, we want ranges B through C, whatever it may be. So product 1, look at B2 to C2. Product 2, look at B3 to C3, etc. We're then going to set up our value ranges, which we want in rows, because that way when we get B2 to C2, everything is saved in just one array. So we can just grab it from index 0 to index 1 easily. And then we're going to pass in the values right here through this method, and then set up the quantity. And then the next step is then we'll pass in this value range, and then pass it in as a parameter right over here under the update range method for the Sheets class. So under the Sheets, I'm going to drill down to Spreadsheets, values, and then finally call update range. So it's set up in a similar fashion if I go back to the page. So just how we have Spreadsheets, values, right over here, if you can see my mouse right here, and then call for ours update. So it's drilling down in that same kind of fashion. But we called it update range because update doesn't we can't call it update since that's a reserved keyword, of course. So, all right, and then I'll pass in the spreadsheet ID for this, the style range, and then the value range, and then we're going to include the values in the response, and then finally say that we want to enter it as if the user was on this page entering this information, and then we'll finally execute this call. All right, so now let's show you, since I've been talking for a good while and you guys haven't seen anything that's actually happening. All right, so I'll refresh this page, and then if I just choose product 2, if I type 3, all right, you can see that 3 was passed into that page, and we get 600. If I type in 30 now, we got 6,000. Select product 5, If I put 40, I got 2,600. So you can see right over here, the minute you type in a value, we're getting that value back into here. And then let me go ahead and show you the debug log as well too, so you can see what's happening on the back end. All right. So if I type in product, if I select product 4, and for this one I'll type in 8, we get 4,000. And keep in mind that, yes, this is, I mean, for this demo, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I'm just typing in a number. We're getting just 4,000, something like that, just a simple multiplication here with some number and here and there. But for our use case scenario, it doesn't really consist of that. There's a lot of dependencies for our pricing calculator. So different products have different dependencies. So if this action was selected, if this one was selected, if that one was selected, then the price might change. It's not a static set amount for our instance, which is why we're using this approach instead of a CPQ solution. All right, so if I go back to the debug log, let's see. You can see that right over here, my endpoint was called to call the values, the update values command, and then I'm selecting for this one, B5 to C5, and then I'm including the values in the response. That way I can get the result of the inputted value. And then we're going to act as if the user put this in. It's going to be a put request. And then this is the result that we get right over here. And then once we get that result, we then get the results right here. So if I'll show you this back in the code, we're printing it out down here. The values response, we're showing us the get updated data, and then right here is where we get the amount right over here on line 24 to get the updated data from that JSON, and then just drill down to get the values, and then just go into the array, and then that's how we get the amount, and then we're all set. So yeah, this is what we built out. So yeah, what do you guys think?
Cool. Wow, Julio, that was amazing. Yeah. Thanks for that, taking the line-by-line coding.
Yeah, of course.
So I just want to quickly run by the conclusion slides. What we learned from this project, like you can see, like streamlining the processes of, sales and pricing within the Salesforce itself. And sales reps, they love this. And I will tell you which part they don't love also. So now all the data, which they enter to capture the price, like bandwidth, geo-traffic distributions and everything, that are residing within the Salesforce in different custom objects. So our sales analytical teams, they can use those data and make a sales strategy. So that's within the Salesforce. And now, there is no loop around. Reps has to use a pricing calculator within Salesforce, and they have, if they're giving the higher discount, then they have to approve the price, and they go for the approach channel. So that is also huge, and this is like some of the reps say, hey, previous was better, even though it's manual steps, but yeah, this is good for a company and the processes. And with that, like after we launched this, within like quarter, we got like our average deal size 23% up. You can see how much that values to the company. And with two other approach how Julio built this, and we design phrases like they don't have to log into the Google, and no shared spreadsheet and things like that. Next 2 points you want to cover, Julio?
Yeah, of course. So just as we mentioned earlier, and as Hitchender just mentioned right now, we don't have to share this with reps. As soon as we onboard a new rep, we just give them access to the page, and that's it. They're not given access to the Google Sheet. They're not downloading it. They're not having to make copies every time we make a new update. It's all done through the service account. As I mentioned before about API calls and not using a lot, Google APIs does have a free, limited amount that you have, a quota. So, but it's very generous for what you get per day. And if you do happen to go over, of course, you can just work with their account executives to add a credit card and adjust the quotas on your end if you happen to go over that. But I'm sure if you utilize them in such a way so that you're not exhausting the API calls, you should be fine. And let's see, of course, the price configuration. So in this demo, we had a lot of things hard-coded, so that's not what we're doing in our product here. So we're using some custom objects, some additional custom settings to pass in those additional parameters. So information about Spreadsheet ID, information about the different products that were selected. None of that's done through the code. All that's done through what I mentioned earlier. And finally, we also have a GitHub available as well. So if you want to contribute and add some additional classes to this, and this is just a basic class, but it does do a lot of things for what it can do at the moment. So I went over updates, but the class already includes other components such as making calls such as a batch update, batch get as well. You can also use, we also have another class on here for Google Drive where you can make copies of files, delete files, and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Any questions?
How has user reception been to it?
How has, sorry?
User reception. People
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, how has user reception been? So yeah, I mean, it's been great. So I mean, as we mentioned earlier, I mean, users don't have to log into the Google Sheet. They don't have to make a copy. They don't have to keep track of all this information, having to go back and forth between Google Sheets and Salesforce.
And also from the day one, we stop that shared Google spreadsheet, so no one has access to the new updated pricing calculator. And so now everyone has to use the Salesforce opportunity, this Visipos page where, which Julio shows, one of the lightning page, to price the products. So it's 100%, like each and every rep has to use it. Even for upsell, like our customer success teams, they have to use it. And I'm sure you guys love the Google spreadsheet and Excel, and you have many processes within that. Like I would say a simple example, like our business operations team, which makes this pricing calculator, like we're talking like so many different teams within the company and outside of company, and they love working within the Excel spreadsheet. So to them, to making the changes in Salesforce is another resources you have to invest for them. But with like they can update the Google spreadsheet anytime, just give it to us the new link, new ID, and we just update that in a custom metadata, and it's boom, it's live, new one. Any other questions? Can I ask us? Yeah.
Aside from the API limits, is there any chance that other terms of service for Google might be broken by certain users of APIs? Like they feel like you're using the Google Docs APIs to kind of circumvent not buying something more expensive from Google that is actually meant for a use case more like this. Did you guys have anything about that?
So can you provide a little bit more clarification on that? So
Just sometimes the terms of service for these
yeah.
services it includes sort of like circumvention clauses that like if you're effectively using APIs to do something that would really be best served by a more sophisticated product, you may actually be hitting an item in the terms of service. I know Salesforce does that.
Yeah.
You effectively roll your own authentication for an app and store the custom object Salesforce is going to say what the heck is now. Are there any concerns that doing this kind of integration with Google might hit any Google terms of service other than that?
I'm not particularly sure about that. So he asked about terms of service, about using this kind of approach with this library and then making the API calls through this library. I mean, I really can't answer that one per se, but I mean, the approach is no different than the API libraries that Google provides by default through the different programming languages. So the approach is similar. So yeah, yes.
Usually you use a spreadsheet when you really want to experiment and manually change things.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what you're doing here. So I'm wondering if the cost of development and also the complexity of having two systems talk to each other is a good trade-off versus you could have coded that calculation prices in Apex.
Well, for our calculations, as we mentioned earlier, the calculations weren't as straightforward. So we had somebody who's like an expert in Excel, and they use like a lot of different formulas that they're working on. So this is just something, the calculation part isn't what I worked on. It was
I think I would cover the other part is like the master sheet, having the like framework of each product and price, final price. But behind the master sheets, there are 22 other sheets with that, and and lot many calculations goes in that. And we find like this is more operationalized, easy, as compared to hardcore those within the Apex or custom objects. So, like the business operations team, they allow the, spreadsheet, and they can use that, and we can update that always in a Google spreadsheet. I think you have questions on the back, yeah?
First of all, cool, really cool.
Thanks.
Have you guys used, or is there available through the Google API documentation, able to access like Google Calendar, or use Google Calendar's API to?
Yeah, so there's a potential for that as well too. Like I mentioned, the only one that has been implemented is the Google Drive and Google Sheets, but there's also the potential to create a class for Google Calendar. But at the same time, I didn't really, there are some cases where it can be applicable for our different products that we have, but we just haven't gotten there yet. But once we do, that will be considered into the roadmap. But with the new product that Lightning offers with the synchronization with Google Calendar, a lot of that's kind of done for you already. So unless you have like a different use case where you might be accessing maybe a calendar from the whole team maybe or something, then you might want to have an Apex job that's checking on that, doing something with whatever you want to do with your own process or, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you guys for joining us.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Great info.